and welcome to today's Energy Storage News webinar with NYSERDA. This is part 2 in the series, Advancing Energy Storage in New York, Building Out the Supply Chain. I'm Andy Colthorpe, Editor of Energy Storage News and Deputy Editor-in-Chief for Publishing at Solar Media, part of the Informa Group. I've been doing this for almost 12 years. Throughout that time, the US has consistently been among the most prolific geographies in the adoption and deployment of energy storage technologies worldwide. That's largely gone hand in hand with the adoption of solar and wind, with solar comprising more than 80% of new capacity additions across the US grid in 2024, despite some prominent political and industry headwinds in very recent times. Renewables backed with energy storage will be among the most critical resources to help keep the lights on and meet rising demand for electricity. As most of you likely know, California and Texas are leading for grid-scale battery deployments among US states today, with over 16 gigawatts on the CAISO grid and around 10 gigawatts in ERCOT in Texas already. But the fundamental drivers for storage are strong almost everywhere. New York not only has those fundamental drivers, but it also has the political will and energy sector know-how to implement them. Our sponsor today, NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Agency, is instrumental in delivering the 6 gigawatt by 2030 energy storage target signed into law by Governor Kathy Hochul. Governor Hochul's recent successful negotiations with the federal government to resume construction of the Empire Wind 1 offshore wind project are perhaps evidence of the can-do attitude and pragmatic collaborative approach that the rest of America and the world have come to respect about New York. Attendees to part 1 of this webinar series in April will have heard about NYSERDA's programs to support energy storage from residential to commercial to utility scale, from NYSERDA President and CEO Doreen Harris and VP for Large-Scale Renewables George Sassine. You can still watch that webinar on demand at Energy Storage News and on our YouTube channel. Today, we focus instead on developing an energy storage supply chain ecosystem in New York and scaling that ecosystem up to become a powerhouse of the US and global industry. And before we go too much further, I just want to launch for you a quick little poll for our audience that I think will help our speakers gauge who we're really addressing, I think, and also just give you a chance to have a little bit of input. So we'd like to ask you all what type of organization you belong to. Is it academic? Are you a consultant? Are you government, manufacturer, software company, or other? And I'm just going to give everyone a minute or two to respond to that. And while we do that, I'm going to welcome our speakers for today. So joining us, very pleased to welcome John Cerveny, who's Senior Director of the New York Battery and Energy Storage Technology Consortium, aka New York BEST. Hi, John. And Stacey Duncan, who is CEO of the Leadership Alliance. Stacey will introduce Leadership Alliance in full, I guess, but Leadership Alliance is a strategic partnership between Broome County Industrial Development Agency and Local Development Corporation and the Greater Binghamton Chamber of Commerce. So yeah, hi Stacey, thanks for joining us. And yeah, just to give you a run through of the polls, I would have to say that the most popular answer is the somewhat nebulous other. So 38% of our audience work in fields other than the ones we've selected. So a little bit mysterious, but that's pretty exciting. A lot of things that could be. We do, however, have an equal number of respondents in consultancy and manufacturing. So that's pretty exciting to see. 22% each consultant and manufacturers. 10% of our viewers are government, 6% academic, and 2% software. So pretty exciting. I'll give you a chance, maybe John and Stacey, to respond to what you were expecting on that a bit later on when I launched the second poll. But yeah, with that, I think that's pretty much all from me. Oh, I should just say as well that if you're watching this and are interested not only to learn about New York's energy storage ecosystem, but also would like to take significant steps forwards to get involved in that industry ecosystem, stay tuned at the end for contact details of the speakers and their organizations, so you can get in touch and help grow the manufacturing sector and supply chain from innovation to mass production and ultimately deployment. The audience will also have further opportunities to get involved in the webinar directly with an audience Q&A session following the speakers' presentations. So please do put your questions for Stacey and John into the questions tab on the right-hand side of your screen. We can't answer all your questions in the short time we have for broadcast, but NYSERDA will be happy to reach out and answer your questions or connect you with the speakers offline. Today's session is being recorded and the video will be available along with the presentation slides at the on-demand section of the Energy Storage News website in the coming days. Wow, that's a long intro from me. So I'll pass you over to who you've been waiting to hear from, John and Stacey, with John to go first. Over to you, John.
Terrific. Thanks so much, Andy. And thank you to our partners at NYSERDA, partners and friends, I should say, at NYSERDA, to sponsoring and inviting me to be part of this webinar. I'm John Cerveny. I'm a senior director at New York BEST, the New York Battery and Energy Storage Technology Consortium. We're an industry association that's been active in New York State for 15 years now. And we have about 185 member organizations and companies that make up the body of our organization. We act as the voice for the energy storage industry in a number of proceedings and activities across the state and have for quite a few years. Here today, really in my role as a leader for what's called the New Energy New York Supply Chain Development Team, we've been focused for the past 3 years, nearly 3 years, on building out the ecosystem and supply chain for manufacturing and battery and energy storage in New York State. And I'll tell you some more about that as we go along. One of the there's a set of common misperceptions about the state of New York, and that it's, and it's an expensive place. It's not a place for manufacturing. The reality is that's just not true. And some of the numbers you see on the screen here indicate a state that has done a lot to make it a good place to do business in the manufacturing and clean energy space in particular. Investments, tax breaks, there's a lot to the story here. And I think today, between what I'll share and Stacey's presentation, you'll see that there's a whole raft of activity that is really pointing toward opportunity for manufacturers and for companies who are interested in expanding or building operations in the state of New York. Workforce is key. I just spent a full day yesterday in a workforce development conference, and the array of partners in the room, it's kind of remarkable, the number of organizations and programs and opportunities that are out there to leverage these numbers in front of us. We have a really strong human resource in the state. We have a long history and capabilities around manufacturing, and we have a focus on the future. And so when you put those things together, you end up with a willing workforce that has opportunity to be trained in the skill sets needed for tomorrow's, today and tomorrow, manufacturing firms. And a lot of that revolves and is driven by a focus on batteries and energy storage that has evolved over the past, decades, but particularly the past 3 years, there's been a huge emphasis, and we'll talk about some of those programs. One of the other things that clearly drives investment and siting are just that, sites. And our state economic development organization, Empire State Development, has for a number of years had the program on the right here called Fast New York, which makes investments through local communities into sites in those communities to make them ready and to get them up to speed and pre-permitted and infrastructure investments, all kinds of improvements that make them that much more available and a more affordable and a speedier build out for industries that are looking to expand. The Power Up program is new and an exciting addition to the bucket of investments the state makes. This program will really create additional electric capacity at a number of the sites where this will go in and do assessments. We'll understand the power requirements of the kinds of companies that could use those sites. And this $300 million that was part of this year's budget in the state will help make those improvements prior even to the companies making their final decisions, just to get the sites in shape and ready. So if I step back and look more broadly at what is it about New York and what has happened here and what's going on in the battery and energy storage ecosystem, one of the headlines here in the top bullet on my chart are these programs. NENY stands for New Energy New York. It's a funded effort. All three of these efforts, the NENY, the Tech Hub designation, and the National Science Foundation Upstate Energy Storage Engine, all reside at Binghamton University, which is the home of Dr. Stanley Whittingham, who is the Nobel laureate from 2019. He won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for his invention of the lithium-ion battery back in the 1970s. Stan is still an active researcher and a very active and thoughtful leader of the efforts that go on across this state, and in particular in the Southern Tier region of New York State. We're the only state that received all three of these designations, and all three of these are focused on battery and energy storage. It gives us a mantle of responsibility, I think, but also recognition of the level of activity that has gone on here and continues to happen around the battery and energy storage space. The combined funding from these programs approaches $200 million, and we are investing those in programs and creating opportunities for companies to engage across the board. We do have a good set of current manufacturers in the state, over 100 companies who are actively in the space. More broadly, that second bullet refers to the whole of the manufacturing enterprise. New York isn't necessarily thought of as a place for manufacturing. The truth is we have 14,000 manufacturers who employ collectively almost over 400,000 employees in the manufacturing space in the state. So there are lots of things made in New York, and we have opportunity to do more. Some of the particular resources that New York Best has had a hand in helping to put in place, Rochester Institute of Technology has what's called the Battery Development Center that includes both a battery prototyping facility and a battery test facility out in Rochester. Intertech has a test lab. Battery New York is a component of the New Energy New York program that will provide a pilot manufacturing center for battery, both for cell production on two 30 megawatt capacity lines. And importantly, that center also will do manufacturing process development. So if you have a new thought and a new method of, say, curing coated electrodes, that's the place to try it out at scale. And that facility is being built as we speak and will be online next year. Brookhaven National Lab has a national synchrotron light source and a beamline that's dedicated to work on batteries, so you can do in-operando testing. I mentioned the engines, the New Energy New York program, and the Tech Hub. All of those have component programs and efforts, and I'd encourage you to take a look at our website and the websites of these organizations to find out more in the great detail there. And importantly, and Andy referenced this in his opening comments, New York has had a long history of leadership and support in this space. We have statewide goals that are very strong around climate and energy energy storage is seen as an important element of reaching those goals. We have a 6 gigawatt target by 2030 for deployment of stationary storage, and nearly $2 billion dedicated to get us there in terms of an incentive program, a set of incentive programs for across the board, really starting at residential, but then a retail program up to 5 megawatts and a bulk program above that. Again, large targets and significant investments to get there. Talked before about these 3 programs and the content of those programs and how they've added up to being more than the sum of the parts. You have a whole set of coalitions in each of these areas that work together, and in many cases, had not necessarily worked together before these programs. We now have regular routine meetings where we focus on a set of objectives and are pushing the ball forward in a very serious way. Moving on, sorry, lost my cursor. There it is. Supply chain development team. We're a component project of the New Energy New York program. We're kind of the boots on the ground with manufacturing. We spend a lot of time at sites with companies and get in the weeds and engage and make connections, find new customers, find new suppliers, and try to connect those dots to weave together the existing resources, but also bring in new resources. We have a set of incentives that we work with our state partners to get on the road and tell the story about what's going on here. We just are back from a battery show in Germany, and I'll got a photo coming up later in the presentation. We have a supply chain database that I encourage you to check out. It's free to be listed. It's free to search. We started with 0 in the database, and we've invited people to apply, and we're at nearly 200 listings now. This is an array of manufacturers and service providers who all have offerings and do business in the state of New York related to batteries and energy storage. And then I mentioned the attraction efforts. We've done a New York State Pavilion at the Battery Show in North America in Detroit last October. We'll be doing that again this year. And we just are back from the Battery Show Europe in Stuttgart. A little more on the supply chain database. Encourage you to check it out. It's a good place to get a snapshot of who's in the space and the kind of work that we do. And if you have questions about people there, we know a lot about who they are, and we can help you connect with them. Just some of the companies, a very small sampling of the kinds of companies we work with across the state in every region, really. You'll see some recognizable names here and others that are quite active and strong players in the space. Share a few headlines. There have been quite a number of investments and announcements just in recent months. This is just a small sampling. But you see Electrovaya and their gigafactory that's being built in Jamestown. You see BAE Systems and investments they are making related to electrified aviation. Battery New York is the facility that I mentioned, the pilot battery manufacturing facility, and Raymond Toyota investment as well. Finally, the New York State Pavilion. I mentioned this. This was our team in Stuttgart, and the booth. It was a really great experience, and I have to say, one that we certainly will be repeating. So that's a quick overview for me. I think now back to Andy for our second poll.
Excellent. Thank you very much, John. And as the audience can see, there are some options on their screens. And I think, you've heard from John kind of about broadly what sort of support is available and kind of what sort of goals are being pursued. But for you, the audience, what is attractive to you as a place for your organization to manufacture or develop energy storage products and/or solutions? Is it competitive incentives? So is an environment that offers loans, grants, equity investments, tax credits, and so on? is it the site readiness? Is it about the actual location itself? Is it about a reliable and clean power grid, which I guess, is also linked to cost of energy, perhaps? Is it about the highly skilled and highly productive workforce? Are you looking for local access to buyers and suppliers? Or do you want an innovation ecosystem? And I believe you can select multiples there. So it's not necessarily about what's most, one thing that is critical, but what do you see as important? So going to give the audience a few minutes to think about, or a couple of minutes, maybe, let's say, to think about that. Hi, Stacey. Thanks very much for joining us. Looking forward to your presentation.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Good, thank you.
Excellent. So what's your prediction on the, let's have a little sweepstake. What's your prediction on the type of organizations that will have responding?
Well, I
sorry, not a type of organization, wrong poll, the other one.
No, John and I spent a day yesterday talking about the topic of a highly skilled and highly productive workforce. And, I think the good thing is I think New York competes so well in all of these areas, but we still find that availability of a strong workforce is very paramount to companies when looking to invest, which is, terrific to see what's happening with training here in this energy storage space here in New York. So I'm going to go with that one.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, not just from New York, but from my conversations with folks in other countries as well, other countries and other states in the US even, it's kind of like the workforce challenge is almost the unreported bottleneck. We hear about a lot of the other things, was it permitting or grid connections and things like that. But, if you really consider it for long enough, like almost everyone says, we really need to have a skilled, trained and willing and able workforce, I guess. And John, what's your prediction for the results?
A lot of the conversations I've had recently, certainly workforce is one or two on most of the list, but I would the other one that keeps popping up is power, available power. So if you're going to build a facility, finding a site that has sufficient power or can have sufficient power, and so it kind of dovetails into that power up program that I highlighted. So hard to know who's in the audience and what their specific needs are, but that one is definitely one that we hear a lot about.
Yeah, interesting. So we can reveal that both workforce and power were important. In fact, all of these options had quite a decent percentage of respondents. So I think it's fair to say that all of these things are important. However, at this point, 28% of the audience said that competitive incentives, so whether that's loans, grants, equity investments, or tax credits, that was the most responded to one. So it wasn't the most important, but it was the most responded to, if that makes sense. So 28% of people ticked that box. An almost equal number actually said reliable, clean power grid and site readiness. So both had just under 20% of respondents, and highly skilled and productive workforce and innovation ecosystem were tied. I mean, I guess you could say that highly skilled workforce and innovation kind of go hand in hand. So I guess that makes a lot of sense. So 14% each for those. And local access to buyers and suppliers was, I guess, not as high on people's lists of priorities, or at least not for everyone. So 7% said local access to buyers and suppliers. So yeah, fair to say competitive incentives was the leader, but all of those other things, site readiness, reliable clean power grid, skilled and productive workforce, innovation ecosystem, and even local access to the buyers and suppliers, which nearly got 10%, all very important. So interesting findings, but with that, my great pleasure to hand over to you, Stacey.
Okay. Well, thank you so much to NYSERDA for inviting me to be part of this panel, and thanks so much to Andy and Energy Storage News as well. And the good news is, I'll repeat that the good news is New York competes incredibly well in all of those areas in that poll, which you've heard a little bit about now, and I'll talk about some more. So my name is Stacy Duncan, CEO of an entity called the Leadership Alliance, which is a partnership between an industrial development agency and a chamber of commerce here in the greater Binghamton, Broome County, but area of New York State. We are proudly located in the Southern Tier region, so you can see on your map to the right, along the Pennsylvania border. So you've heard a little bit about New York State's ecosystem. I'm going to just drill down a little bit more into our regional ecosystem here in the Southern Tier, and why we think it is a terrific opportunity to become part of the Southern Tier region and broadly New York State's energy storage ecosystem. So a little bit about the Southern Tier. We are a region that is reignited, reimagined, and ready for transforming the clean tech economy here in New York State. I think you've heard a little bit about why New York provides an ideal ecosystem for clean tech manufacturing. Here in the Southern Tier, we've gone through, I think, a remarkable transformation in a way, but also a return to some of our legacy roots in manufacturing innovation, research and development, and material sciences. A little known fact: one of the first patents for the electric vehicle was actually secured here in the Southern Tier region by BAE Systems. So it is very core to who we are in the Southern Tier to support clean tech manufacturing and innovation. So we have really focused on those tradable sectors that are of importance to New York State leadership. That includes EV power systems, semiconductor test and packaging, energy storage and battery ecosystem, of course, and then as well in life sciences and agribusiness. We are also a region that's on the rise. The Southern Tier is first in New York State in a concentration of advanced manufacturing and electronics jobs. We graduate actually about 3 times the national average for STEM here in the region, buoyed by universities such as Binghamton University and Cornell. In a recent study report done by MIT University about U.S. regions poised to be a technology hub, the Southern Tier region was ranked as 8th in the nation. So again, a core competency of ours is in innovation and research and development, and then applying that into the manufacturing processes. And we've seen significant wage growth as well as employment growth in the clean tech manufacturing sector. And I think we're poised to continue that growth into the future. So when looking at those competitive assets, that the poll, I think, highlighted so many important ones. The Southern Tier region strikes, I think, punches above our weight. We'd like to say we are one of the smaller regions of New York State, but we are highly competitive in the areas of higher ed, research and development, with 2 R1, the highest classification for research that you can get in the United States, R1 research universities, as I mentioned, manufacturing anchors, which I'll talk about in a few, and also market proximity, which is very critical to large OEMs as well as supply chain companies with access to the entirety of the Northeast and Northeast Canadian markets. John spoke a little bit about some of the research and innovation assets through Binghamton University, so I won't spend too much time on those. But again, just repeating, Binghamton University-led coalitions was the only coalition to receive 3 very significant federal funding for energy storage and clean tech research and development, as was noted earlier. And New York State was one of the only states to receive not 1, but 2 designations as a federal tech hub. This was a United States designation that opens up a number of opportunities for additional funding for research, development, innovation, and manufacturing. And we like to think of ourselves at the intersection of the dynamic work that's happening between the electrification of so many manufacturing processes and semiconductor manufacturing. Binghamton University is the state's designated center of excellence for flexible electronics, as well as test and packaging, and material science. So these are the things that we do best here, and it is a great opportunity to connect to that ecosystem. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but I think it's important to demonstrate those areas of research that we are specifically, the breadth of research that we do here in the Southern Tier region of New York, as noted through the Center of Excellence, also called the Small Scale Systems for Integration and Packaging. As you can see, we're looking at research across the board with electronics packaging, looking at things like energy smart electronic systems, so power management, duration of life for batteries, and also other things such as semiconductors as well. So it is a unique offering that we have here in the region from a research and development perspective. John alluded to this as well, and you see some similar names, but we have a number, and these are a small sampling of key energy storage assets here in the Southern Tier region. So we are anchored by strong companies such as Toyota Material Handling, BAE Systems, Alstom, to name a few, but robust R&D assets, as was noted. But I think it's also important to highlight when we're talking about the value chain of energy storage, we have a lot of work and a lot of resources for new technologies, new startup companies that are supported through the Kauffman Southern Tier Incubator. This is located here in the Binghamton, New York area. I think there are currently more than 30 clean energy startups affiliated with the Kauffman. Those are both national and international startups. And I'll talk a little bit about a burgeoning success story connected to that in just a few. So the question is why New York and why now? Competitive incentives and financing was one of the top responses to that poll. And this slide I won't go through all of these, but just gives you a sampling of the breadth of incentive programs that are available in New York State that span state incentive programs to local programs, such as the ones my organization administers for really capital improvements or capital construction of buildings, as well as a number of research and development and workforce development programs. John noted the battery prototyping center that will be up and operational in just about a year from now. But we also have a robust offering of programs through the Battery Academy. These are online programs that people can enter the battery workforce through a number of certificate and training programs, as noted, incubation and acceleration. And we're also planning to build a regional workforce training center specifically for manufacturing, but the new technologies such as battery manufacturing to support the future. And then organizations like Empire State Development and NYSERDA are really creating dynamic and customized and responsive incentive programs to support relocation or expansion here in New York State. Specifically, and I think John pointed out ones that we like a lot from a site readiness perspective, but I'd also note that there are funding tools available for capital grants of new builds, but also the Excelsior Tax Credit Program, which is a very targeted and I think a very easy to use incentive program that we think is a very strong program for operating companies in New York State. And the state is going even further and tailoring those to critical sectors like energy storage and semiconductor manufacturing. So New York has done a terrific job of creating customized, very usable and applicable incentive programs for companies at various levels of development. And so just I wanted to offer a few success stories that are of companies that are advancing the energy storage ecosystem in New York State and also here in the Southern Tier region. A company I'm sure is quite familiar to attendees, BAE Systems. BAE Systems here in the Southern Tier region employs about 1,500 individuals. They have two areas of focus. They have their power propulsion systems, or their electronic and hybrid drive systems for things such as buses and other forms of transportation. And they also have controls and avionics. And as a result of investment from New York State and others, BAE will invest $65 million into expanding into their current location to create a new battery production line and lab space for the production of energy storage systems for electric and hybrid aircraft. So that state investment that was provided was $9 million through the Excelsior Tax Credit Program. And the construction and renovation is already underway, and we're excited to see what they do to further the energy storage, the electrification of aircraft here in our community. Toyota Material Handling, also located currently here in the region as well in other parts of New York State, is investing $16 million to expand operations to produce cutting-edge energy solutions. That state investment is $1 million, again, through the Excelsior Tax Credit Program. And as well, my organization was able to provide local support through a payment in lieu of tax program. And then lastly, just sort of the opposite end of the value chain, this is a great story. As a startup company, Bridge Green Upcycle is a Binghamton-based clean energy startup that uses low carbon mining-free lithium-ion battery upcycling process. They've begun their work by starting with the Kauffman Incubator system, and they're also connected to one of the programs John mentioned, the Upstate New York Energy Storage Ecosystem. And they've already received seed funding through an entity called Launch New York. And we envision, as they grow, some of those state incentive programs and perhaps local will come into play to help with their growth. So to close us out, there are a number of ways to, I think, gain entry into the energy storage ecosystem here in New York State. Certainly the Build It Clean, Build It Better program operated by NYSERDA is one worth checking out. They've been an incredible partner in driving a clean energy future. John mentioned the supply chain database through New York Best, which is a terrific resource, and I encourage you to get involved and get listed if you're not. And then lastly, local economic development or regional economic development. We are very interested to hear how we might support your growth or expansion or investment here in the Southern Tier region. And so with that, Andy, I think I will turn it back over to you. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Stacey. And yeah, thanks to you both for some great presentations. We have run a little bit over time, as is often the case when we're having a nice time, I suppose. But let's do a couple of questions from the audience, because I think that's only fair. So thanks very much to the folks that asked some great questions. Maybe if you get another question in the next minute or two, I might just ask it. So give that a try. Obviously, any questions that we don't reply to now, NYSERDA will be happy to get in touch with you. But anyway, enough procrastination from me. There's a good question here from Jay. So thank you for your question, Jay. Jay asks, given rising tariffs and ITC, that's investment tax credit, uncertainty, do you think New York's current incentives are sufficient to keep storage projects financially viable? How are developers adjusting to maintain momentum? And I'm kind of aware that question, it's a great question, Jay. I mean, it is kind of more angled towards downstream development, which is obviously really important, but love to hear perspectives on that from John and Stacey if they have them. But if we could just broaden it out to more fairly encompass, let's say, the subject of this webinar and say, what do we think the likely impacts of federal policies, such as the reconciliation bill, might be on manufacturing and R&D? So broadly speaking, policy changes and the impact on incentives. I don't know who wants to go with that first. John, maybe you?
Yeah, I'd take a swing. So I think broadly, if I kind of look at the two questions together, one of the themes that evolves is that as the uncertainty at the federal level, continues to a degree until we have some settled, policy, it's incumbent on states like New York, and New York is really one of the leaders in this space, to continue to make the investments that we've been making and to roll out the set of incentive programs that I mentioned briefly in my remarks. This $2 billion worth of incentives to deploy stationary storage are designed to buy down some of that upfront cost, and in a much similar fashion to what ITC does on deployments. I think you look to places where there's leadership, where there's investment, and what you see from New York is and particularly I'll highlight the bulk program has a index storage credit mechanism that is designed to mitigate risk around pricing for capacity. And so it's a first in its nation approach to this, and quite innovative. There'll be a bid system that decides who gets those incentives. If the ITC goes away, I would expect that the price that would be bid would be higher, and so it will drive a different set of dynamics in that process. But the investment from the state will remain, and so we're on a path to get us to the 6 gigawatts by 2030. In real terms, that means deploying something like 3 megawatts per day in the state between now and 2030. It's kind of a daunting sounding number, but some of those facilities will be quite large and take a big bite out of that total target. So I think, again, it kind of just comes back to identifying the places that are continuing to make investments and building that capital stack around what it takes to get a system built and deployed.
That's a great answer, John. Thanks very much, and quite a comprehensive answer from John there. But Stacey, anything you want to add on that, the aspect of incentives?
Yeah, I think given certainly uncertainty at the federal level, what we're seeing in New York State is sort of a renewed or reinforced commitment to supporting this ecosystem. I mean, there's been so much investment made thus far, and as noted, New York has been a leader in driving a clean energy, a clean tech economy. So I don't see that as something that will go away. And in fact, as noted earlier, they're being very intentional and thoughtful in developing, in revising or modifying existing incentive programs like Excelsior tax credits to make sure that we're supporting those key sectors that New York has made a commitment to. So, the only other thing I'd add is this is also an opportunity where other resources can come in. So how we can support regional and academic and industry collaboration to lower costs, to make manufacturing processes more efficient and cost effective. That a lot of that work is being done through the Innovation Engine and Tech Hub and New Energy New York programs, as well as new funding, like I noted earlier, through entities like Launch New York to support innovation in this space. So there again a lot of uncertainty, but I don't see New York's commitment waning anytime soon.
Excellent. Well, that's great to hear. And a challenge of a question here from Gear. So thanks for your question, audience member Gear, who asks or says China is #1 in battery cell R&D. How do you cooperate with the Chinese cell manufacturing corporations? To be honest, I have to be brutally honest. When I misread this question, I thought Gear was asking how you compete with the Chinese cell manufacturing corporations, but actually is asking how you cooperate with them. So just wondering what the competitive dynamics on that are. I mean, I think it's fair to say that China has a pretty major head start in the battery ecosystem, and we can all debate where that came from originally and what have you. But yeah, reality is at the moment that's the case. So how do you guys view that? Either the competitive or globally cooperative position of New York supply chain within that.
Yeah, I can put a few thoughts out there. China clearly leads the world in production, in the high volume, low cost manufacturing of cells, and has been making those investments and continuing to drive out cost and increase throughput and productivity for certainly a decade and a half. And so there's a lot to be learned, frankly, on the manufacturing end of the process from how they do things. And I do think there are opportunities for joint venture for us to bring some of that know-how here. And we've had conversations across the board with places that are interested, with companies who are interested in doing just that. So I think that's one piece of the answer. But the focus on R&D, that's a more recent, I would say, evolution for China. The investment in the massive investments in R&D. I would say that we still, as a country, as a nation, are doing well in this space as well. And when you look at the other investments that are being made, these we've talked about quite a bit today. The idea is to be able to drive that innovation even harder and to then capitalize on it. So invent it here, but keep it here for the production. And so the investments in the battery prototyping center, the investments in the battery testing center, the investment that's underway now for this pilot manufacturing Battery New York Center, all of those add up to shorter time and less cost to get from a good idea in the lab to a product in the market, and to do it at scale. So we're doing our very best, I would say, to make improvements across the board, and to make that happen here in the state of New York.
Excellent. That's exciting to hear. Anything to add on that side of things, Stacey?
No, I thought John's answer was incredibly thoughtful on that. It is a challenging. There are certainly geopolitical challenges that make some of that cooperation uncertain. But to John's point, I think where we can find opportunities to collaborate, we should be doing that. But I agree. I think the more we can build this ecosystem from within and look at other partners throughout, other international partners as well, research that's happening in Europe in this space, for example, and building this as a truly a national effort to build this ecosystem. I think we're going to make large strides, very quickly. We're already seeing that happen through these partnerships with research and academics and industry, addressing applied research and solving problems. So so I think it's going to be an opportune time for us to expedite our knowledge and catch up to a degree of where we are now.
Excellent. Thanks, Stacey. And that mention of collaboration reminds me that I think we were talking earlier before the session that there's the fall conference for New York Best. John, do you want to just tell the audience a little bit about that? I think they got a pop up on their screen.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks
to learn more.
Thanks for the prompt. We have our Energy Storage Technology Innovation Conference. It's a one-day event this year being held in Ithaca, New York. It's a beautiful time of year to be in Ithaca at end of October. And it is a focused conversation around where we are on a number of research fronts, deployments of energy storage and some of the innovative methods being done around those kinds of deployments. It's a great way for people to engage with the research community in the state and beyond, and from beyond. The conference draws quite broadly, at least regionally in the U.S. And we welcome people to take a look at that and we do have a call for abstracts open now. So if you have a good idea that you'd like to get in front of an audience of interested, like-minded people, we'd love to hear about your thoughts and have you submit an abstract.
Awesome, that's great. I'm sure lots of folks will get involved with that. And I think, you know, we've massively run over time, but I did say that I give people that asked the final question the opportunity. So well done, Max. Your prize is coming up. So Max asks if there's a focused priority on long duration energy storage systems. And I'm aware that the New York Community Leadership and Climate Protection Act does contain some provisions on working towards long duration. So I don't know if specifically long duration, or if you want to comment on the range of energy storage technologies that are being looked at. But yeah, either with regards to New York Best's activities there, or even Stacey with the kind of companies that Leadership Alliance is supporting. What sorts of, you know, how broad is the technology spectrum, let's say?
Yeah, I'll just quickly, there's actually a solicitation open right now from NYSERDA to support R&D and demonstrations around particularly areas of interest include long duration storage. There's been a number of rounds of investment around those kinds of technologies. There's when you look at our needs as a state, as we continue to climb the curve on clean, emissions-free grid, long duration increasingly becomes a part of that solution. And there are definite needs by 2040 that, frankly, we don't have all the answers in hand on the long duration pieces. So there's very much a focused investment around how to get those technologies to scale and to be cost effective.
Excellent, thanks, John. Anything to add on that, Stacey, on the, let's say, the broadness of technology?
Yeah, I would just add, yeah, I think for to meet the goals of New York State's certainly their energy goals and transformation to clean tech energy, I think that long duration for grid reliability and sustainability is going to be paramount. So I think the state will make a focus of that. And as well, we're looking at, for example, in the Southern Tier region, we're looking at the development of a large-scale multi-tenant technology park to host supply chain companies, but also we're looking at how we power, a 600-acre park. So we're looking at all forms of alternative energy systems. So I think looking at battery energy storage systems and certainly longer duration systems that could support the operations of the park is going to be something that we're going to look at as well. And I would argue my colleagues across the state, when looking at site preparation, are going to be looking at these kind of systems as well.
That's awesome. Thanks. Okay, thanks so much. Well, folks, it's been a really interesting session, I think. Thanks a lot to everyone who asked questions at the end there. Want to say thanks to our sponsors and co-hosts, NYSERDA. Thanks to NYSERDA for bringing along to such really nice and expert speakers as well, in Stacey Duncan from Leadership Alliance and John Cerveny from New York Best. Been a pleasure working with you both. And most of all, I would like to thank the audience, everyone who registered, who joined in, who listened closely, and also, because if you're here, then you're in the right place. You're in a great industry. It's really exciting. Whatever the challenges day to day might be, I feel like it's got a great shot of overcoming them. So thanks very much, and we'll look forward to seeing you all next time.